Fresh off his first NL MVP, Ronald Acuña is looking to make history for the second consecutive season. And I want to ask you, Alex, do you see 50-50 in his future? His career high in home runs is 41. But as I always say, Ronald Acuña, if he elevates 50 balls as hard as he hits it, he's going to easily sniff 50 home runs because nobody hits it as hard as him in the game of baseball, and nobody has more power than him in the game of baseball outside of maybe like Giancarlo Stanton or Aaron Judge. Very few players.
Yeah.
I definitely
you just named two guys that weigh
are 6'7", 250 pounds.
Go ahead.
Listen, I think it's very possible, and I know a lot of people are going to look at his career high of 41 home runs, but if you just go look at the last couple of months of last year, he was not on track to hit 40-40. I mean, he wasn't even close. His last 2 months, his pace for homers and steals, and I'm not just making a stupid joke, was 69 and 69. That's over the last 2 months. Now, obviously, that's probably not sustainable over 6 months, but if he does that for 3 months or 4 months out of the year, he's easily going to be flirting with 50 home runs. And if you just go the last half of last year, he's right on pace for 50 home runs. I definitely think it's possible. It's all about elevating the baseball. And as we've talked about with Ronald Acuña, he gets better and better every single year. I don't expect that to change. I know it's 50-50 sounds great. And listen, it's not even going to be 50-50. Let's be real. It's going to be like 50-60, 50-70. 50-80. Like, I mean, it's going to be ridiculous. And at the very least, he could be flirting with 45, 50, 45, 70, whatever it is.
I don't remember exactly the stat, but it was something along the lines of like Ronald Acuña versus teams batted balls over 100 miles an hour or something like that. And he had more batted balls over 100 miles per hour than like 20-something other teams.
Yeah, I think it was like 24.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of power this guy possesses. Nobody possesses power like Ronald Acuña Jr. on a pound-for-pound basis. As you mentioned, like the guys that you think of who are hitting it as hard as often are 250 pounds plus. Ronald Acuña Jr. is probably not over 215, maybe.
Well, they're not hitting it as hard as often. It's just like if they catch one, they might hit it as hard. And we're talking about like a 5 foot deep difference. Like Giancarlo Stanton might be able to hit one 505 feet. Ronald can hit one 500. So there's no one really out there with as much power. And if you go look at Ronald Acuña's stats from last year, they truly are incredible. They're just unbelievable because the numbers on paper were ridiculous, but they were actually worse than his expected numbers. Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who was second in the league in batted balls over 100 miles per hour that resulted in outs. This is a guy whose expected batting average, his real batting average was 37. His expected batting average was like 350. So he's actually like as good as he was last year.
He's unlucky.
The advanced metrics tell you he could have easily been better. Oh, and by the way, he's got another year of experience. Oh, and by the way, he's one more year removed from a devastating ACL injury. The guy stays healthy. I mean, that is really the only thing we're talking about Ronald Acuña, because I said it. Ronald Acuña has a chance to be a top 10 to 20 player of all time, and maybe even better than that, as long as he can stay on the baseball field.
Yeah, one of the greatest Braves of all time, Chipper Jones, said that Ronald Acuña Jr. is the most talented player to ever wear this
I don't
jersey.
think it's debatable.
And it's not even debatable. Obviously, Hank, the longevity he had is Tom Brady-esque, did it for 2 decades at a very, very high level. But if we're talking about just a moment in time in terms of greatness, Ronald Acuña Jr. is up there with some of the greatest names in sports, not just baseball. So I think, and to your point about this kid's just entering his prime, I'm talking about the prime physical years of his career, where he's just like 26 years old. And, we want to get into the physiological aspect of it all. It's like men don't really, hone in all of their physical skills until 27, 28 years old. So
I mean, you can even go like 29.
Yeah. So let's just say it's 28 for argument's sake. So he's still 2 years removed from that. And then, as you mentioned, talking about this part of the game, the mental aspect of the game, it's only going to get better. It will never get worse. So it's just to say that 50-50 is out of reach or unattainable. You're just a hater, or you enjoy playing the contrarian, because I could even go as far to say something like 55-65, 55-70 is very possible.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite, I know we've had a lot of good guests on here, but when Ron Gant came on here, one of the only other Braves in the 30-30 club, and he came out and said, Ronald Acuña developed this sixth tool, which not a lot of players had. And we saw it in terms of dropping his strikeout rate by more than half. And we saw it in the rise in batting average and OBP and all that stuff. But he even went as far to say is Ronald Acuña's out there baiting pitchers to throw him the pitches that he wants. Like he's acting like he doesn't like certain pitches, fouling off certain pitches, waiting for his pitch. And when you talk about the best hitters in the game, that is what they do. And they're not, and when I'm saying that, there's not a lot of guys that even have the potential or the chance or the opportunity to do something like that. Ronald Acuña had a 402 OPS plus. That's 402% above league average on 0-2 pitches. I mean, the guy is stupid. I've never, I mean, and I know a lot of Braves fans are watching this like just agreeing, but it truly needs to be talked about in terms of just absolute greatness that we've never seen. Because as good as Hank was, he won 1 MVP. Ronald Acuña doesn't get hurt in 2021. He has 2 MVPs and as many World Series under his belt by the age of 26. I mean, he is a freak at baseball. And the guy just loves it. I mean, you just go look at him in Venezuela. He's out there. Yeah. All the guy does is think and breathe and love baseball.
Well, there's a lot of people who have been around, you know, the Hall of Famers, not just in baseball and sports all over. I like to liken different sports. You know, the love, obsession is always going to beat talent. And when you marry the two, you get something truly transcendental. And that's what you got with Ronald Acuña. He's got all the talent in the world, and he's absolutely obsessed, in love with the game of baseball. And you're seeing, you know, the product of that. You know, the fruit of his labors is history.
Yeah. And cool fact, he just bought a car wash in Georgia.
So he's not going anywhere.
And he's planning on buying a bunch more. Hey, man, all I'm saying, now just sign that extension. Yep. Let's get a car wash company. It'll be the biggest car wash in the history of Georgia. Coming up after the break, what will Chris Sale and Jared Kelenic bring in their first year as Atlanta Braves?